Now, when I uploaded the first Tears of the Kingdom myth-busting video, I didn't expect it to do so incredibly well. It completely blew up, so I would like to thank all of you so much for that. And in order to celebrate, I got another one for you. This time filled with even crazier claims, and even some stuff that was suggested in the comment section by all of you. Yes, I read the comments and respond to a lot of them. So without further ado, let's look at 15 more myths from Zelda Tears of the Kingdom to see if they are real or not. And believe me, each time you think you have seen everything this game has to offer, your mind is blown once again. Number 15. Now, one problem a lot of players came across is the battery running out when using Zonai machines. Usually this is annoying, but not the end of the world. It forces you to wait a bit or recharge your batteries using specific items. However, when you're up in the sky, it can be a massive problem, because all of a sudden, you will fall back to Earth pretty quick. So, is there a way around this? Well, multiple people online claim that there is, and two tricks I came across involve recall and cooking. Apparently, if you're on a wing or any other flying machine, using recall on it allows you to recharge your batteries, and this actually works. However, as you can imagine, it has its problems. If you use recall the whole time, you're effectively going nowhere, so it could be handy in some instances. For example, when you're fighting a boss like a Gleeok, but aside from that, it's pretty useless. But luckily enough, the cooking pot trick also works, and it fixes this problem. When I first saw this, I was like, nah, impossible. But it works! If you add a cooking pot on your vehicle, you can use it to recharge your battery. Just cook a meal and the game will kind of freeze in place. But meanwhile, your batteries will recharge, allowing you to get a lot further. And personally, I love that these claims are 100% true. Number 14. Now, in my last video, I tested a myth that adding butter to a shield would improve your shield surfing. And after I released that video, a lot of people in the comment section claimed that you could use other stuff to achieve this. One of those was adding an ice sheet to your shield. But does this actually work? Well, yes, and it's quite logical. Ice is slippery in real life and even in the game, because as we all know, the game has realistic physics. And so if you walk up to a body of water, throw in a white chew jelly to freeze it, and attach the newly created ice sheet to your shield, you can surf down hills at incredible speeds. With the added bonus that replacing the sheet of ice is very simple. All you need is some water and something that can freeze it. So it's cool to see that people share some amazing stuff in the comment section that is actually very handy and true. Number 13. Now, when making vehicles in the game, you sometimes run into the problem that what you created is anything but stable. And so with every turn or hard brake, you will fall over, and so you need to get back on it, which can be a bit of a pain. I have had this problem many times when making a simple Segway type vehicle, but according to some, there is a solution. Apparently, if you add a stabilizer, it will actually keep the vehicle in line and it's impossible to tip over or roll. And after testing it in the game with this cool bike, I can tell you it 100% works. Hell, sometimes it even works too well. I ended up drifting way more than I normally would because I got almost no feedback from the vehicle itself that I was oversteering. So it almost works too well, but at least now I will never fall over again and it barely uses any power. Number 12. Now, in my last video, I tested a claim involving the monster eyeballs that can be found in the game. These can be super handy when using an arrow, because when you stick them on top, they allow for auto-aim. As long as you shoot in the general direction, it will always be a headshot, which is handy in a lot of scenarios. However, people claim that adding one on a vehicle could replace a steering stick in a pinch, but in the end, that wasn't true at all. Adding an eye basically did nothing. But then people in the comment section said the following: if you added an eye to a vehicle or something else, would it at least go in the direction of an enemy? You know, like the arrows do. Well, after some testing with this homemade, a drone that is completely safe, I found out that it isn't a thing whatsoever. No matter how hard I try, the eye doesn't really change anything. Sure, it adds some weight, which influences the vehicle, but it doesn't allow for effective steering or some sort of auto-aim or direct. So sadly enough, this myth remains completely false. So just use them for your arrows. Number 11. With mechanics like the slow-mo that you enter when drawing a bow in mid-air, it is handy to sometimes go high into the sky. But how can you achieve this easily? Well, I came across a claim on the internet that was very promising and also cost-effective. People, again in my comment section, claimed that adding a spring to your shield works really well, with some saying that it can be used again and again, making it almost perfect, while others said it was good, but you can only use it once. Now, after some simple testing, I found out that it works and it's actually a great option in the game, because they are easy to find and don't require many resources. However, after using them only one time, they will disappear, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense because normally they last a whole lot longer. But I bet this was done to nerf them a bit, otherwise you could constantly jump around with barely any cost attached. But hey, at least it works. Number 10. In the game, you have a couple of different loadouts when it comes to weapons. 3 basically. Two-handed spears, other two-handed weapons like hammers or swords, and a one-handed weapon combined with a shield. However, I came across claims that you could also dual wield 2 one-handed weapons. But this is impossible, right? Well, yes, it isn't in the game at all. You can't do this no matter how hard you try. But there is a way to sort of achieve this. Because if you combine a blade or something like that with your shield, you can deal damage with a parry. Now personally, I thought that this would be completely useless, but actually it's great when you use elemental weapon parts. This way you have a shield that can freeze enemies with a simple parry, or electrocute and disarm them. Meanwhile, you aren't exposing yourself to any kind of counterattack, so it's a really safe strategy as well. It's something I had never thought of before, but you can do it. Sure, it isn't dual wielding, but it's close. So I would say that this one isn't true or false, but some sort of plausible. Number 9. Now we've seen that combining Ultra Hand and Recall is incredibly useful in the game. For example, when you try to fly away using a wing, or when fighting enemies in the game by using materials you find in the world. However, one claim I came across was quite interesting, but I was also quite confused by it, to be honest. According to people online, you can take a weapon, drop it on the ground, pick it up with Ultra Hand and spin it around, and then you just use Recall to ward off any enemies. But does this really work? Well, you would think so, but no, it doesn't damage enemies or Link whatsoever. However, is there a way to make it work? Well, yes. Weirdly enough, if you add more weapons to it using Ultra Hands, then the added weapons actually do deal damage. Which doesn't really make sense, but who cares? Because using this, you can create a spinning weapon of death where you stand safely in the middle, which can be handy when taking on a bunch of bokoblins. Number 8. Now, when I saw that the Koroks returned in Tears of the Kingdom, I was quite happy actually. I love those small little puzzles that were seen in Breath of the Wild, and in the new game they took it to the next level with those little travel quests, although some people decided to torture them instead of helping them out. But that's besides the point, because I want to talk about the more simple puzzles, specifically the one where you need to drop a rock in the right spot to create a circle. These are seen all over the place, but according to some you can also solve these in a different way. Just fuse a stone to a weapon and slam that rock in place. But does that work? Well, surprisingly enough, yes! I never expected this to be real, but it is, as you can see right here. It's clear that it will work as long as a rock fills the gap, creating a circle. So I bet there are many other creative ways of solving this puzzle, and I'm curious what people will try down the road. Number 7. Now this next one we will look at was suggested by my buddy Master of Hyrule. On Twitter he asked me the following: can you get a bokoblin to a sky island without them disappearing? He tried this himself multiple times but could never pull it off. So is this even possible at all? Well, I tried this many times. Because as you can imagine, working with bokoblins is pretty tough. They aren't really willing to get on some sort of weird airship after all, so I had to freeze them. Now usually I failed completely, but a couple of times I was able to actually get them into the air. But each time I ran into the issue that either the bokoblin would mess up, or my Zonai tech would completely run out and I couldn't go high enough. So while I never saw the bokoblin actually despawn or something, it seems impossible due to the limitations of the Zonai Zonai technology. In the end, I couldn't pull it off. The only option that seems possible to me is using one of the rocks that fall out of the sky to transport the bokoblin up into the sky. But even then, getting him on one of the sky islands is impossible almost. So while it might be possible theoretically, in practice, it will never really work. Number 6. Now, all of us at this point have probably seen the new bubble frogs. They are often encountered in caves, and finding them is quite fun actually. And as some of you might know, if you collect the gems they drop, you get some really good rewards when you hand them in. However, one thing I personally always wondered about is, can you actually get rupees from this as well? I mean, when you take out a bubble frog, we can see that a bloopy spawns and runs away. So if you shoot those, do they drop rupees just like all the others found in the world of Hyrule? Well, sadly enough, no. They don't drop anything when you shoot them, which you can clearly see here, which is a bit odd. Normally, you always get rupees from them, but not this time, and I'm not really sure why. Number 5. Now, before the release of Tears of the Kingdom, I made a video talking about what would be possible in the game. Specifically, what items would do if you fused them with an arrow. And one that I talked about is the coarser bee honey. In the game, when you try to collect these, you will always get harassed by the bees that live inside of it. So if you combine it with an arrow, shield, or melee weapon, it releases bee hell on your enemies, right? Well, yes, this one is 100% true. It works exactly as I expected before the game even came out. Now sure, it isn't the most effective attachment, but it could be useful to create some sort of distraction. However, aside from that, I don't see any use for it, to be honest. But still, it's cool to see that it's possible. Number 4. When running around the world of Hyrule, you will quite quickly come across this guy, Addison. He can be found all over the world trying to place signs for the Hudson Construction Company, and usually you get a small reward if you help him out by keeping the sign in place. And in order to achieve this, you have to create some sort of structure that holds it in place. Personally, I find this a very fun challenge, and always do them if I come across him. But recently I saw somebody claim that a lot of these can actually be solved quite easily using one little trick. All you need is Link and a stable platform, because if Link stands underneath it, he can actually support the sign using his own head. And at first I thought, nah, this can't be. But in a lot of cases, it actually works, although sometimes it doesn't. As you can see right here, there are 2 signs above each other, and that won't really work. The sign will still fall over. Clearly, it doesn't always work. So when it comes to this one, I will label it as plausible. Number 3. Like I mentioned in a previous video, getting around Hyrule is very important, and while we lost some stuff that was seen in Breath of the Wild, we got a lot of new things as well. Mainly the Zonai devices, which can be used to travel both in the sky and on the ground, which is great. But at some point I got an idea. What would happen if you attach the Zonai Wheel to a shield using Fuse? Normally these allow you to get around really fast while using almost no energy, and so you can travel really far. But does it combine well with the shield? Well, no. No matter what you do, it's attached sideways. And so each time you shield surf, the wheel does activate, but you will fall hard. So yeah, cool idea, but it doesn't work, because Nintendo made it so! Sadly enough. Number 2. One of the first things that I tried when the game released was combining an Octo balloon with an arrow. Just imagine what you could do. For example, an enemy has a weapon in his hand, and so you shoot it with this fused arrow and disarm him with his weapon flying away. This would be incredibly useful, but is this really a thing in the game? Or does it have no impact at all? Well, yes and no. If you shoot one of these arrows at an enemy, it basically does nothing at all. The balloon pops, the enemy takes damage, and then you're in for a fight. However, when you do the same thing on items found on the ground, it does work. The balloon will attach to it, and the thing will float, as you can see right here with this melon. But at the end of the day, this isn't very useful. So this doesn't work, which makes me very sad because I really hoped I could make a bokoblin fly with this. But no. Number 1. Now another thing people suggested to me in order to improve my shield surfing is frozen food. And personally I thought this was a very good suggestion, and so I did. But there was a problem. It didn't work. So I thought, well, this myth is fake. When I fused a frozen drumstick to my shield, things only got worse. But then I decided to experiment more. I mean, I had to try other types of meat as well, and at that point I realized something important. You need a thick piece of meat on your shield, otherwise it won't improve shield surfing whatsoever. The thing to keep in mind is that the meat needs to have solid contact with the ground for it to work. So while at first I thought it was fake, I now label it as plausible, because you need the right type of meat to pull it off, and not all of them will work. Now these were my 15 myths, but don't forget, I have another video about this as well, so go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you all so much for the support. The last video did really well, the myth busting one. I could see that people watched a lot of the video and people were very excited to click on it and all that stuff, so that was very good. And the comments overall were very positive and good feedback and whatnot, so I hope this video is even better than the last one, and I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe, click the bell button, leave a like and all that good stuff. I love you all, bye! Mwah! Big kiss from Papa.